I can't understand why the airline would allow someone like you on the plane. Get out of that seat immediately. You don't deserve it. You need to leave this seat right now.
I paid for this seat in full. Explain what right you have to force me out as a customer of the airline.
You have no right to speak here. I am the authority, and if I don't allow you to sit there, then you are not allowed to.
I cannot understand how this major airline could hire a flight attendant like you, lacking both professionalism and attitude. I want to speak with the captain.
Sir, that's enough.
There is no need to speak to the captain. I have full authority here. Move to economy immediately, or I will call security. Move. Your seat is in economy.
You will regret treating me like that.
Her life ended in 8 minutes. Let's get into the story.
Sir, you need to move. Now. The words didn't sound loud. They didn't need to. In the sealed silence of a first-class cabin, they cut sharper than any shout. A few heads turned, then more. The soft clink of crystal paused mid-air. Someone halfway through lifting a glass of champagne froze, wrist suspended, breath held. Seat 2A. That was where it started. Ethan Cole didn't look up right away. He sat still, shoulders relaxed against the wide leather seat, one hand resting lightly on the armrest, the other holding a slim glass of champagne that caught the warm cabin light like polished gold. Navy suit. Tailored. Quiet. No logos screaming for attention. No need. To most people in that cabin, he looked comfortable. To Margaret Collins, he looked wrong. She stood in the aisle, posture rigid, chin slightly lifted, her smile already gone. 30 years in the sky had carved certainty into her bones. She knew who belonged in her cabin, and who didn't. "Sir," she repeated, voice tighter now, each word pressed flat. "You're in the wrong seat." Ethan lifted his eyes, slowly, not startled, not offended, just aware. The kind of awareness that comes from a man who has seen this moment before. Different place, same script. "I'm not," he said. His voice was low, even. Controlled. It didn't rise to meet her tone. It didn't challenge. It didn't defend. It stated. Margaret's jaw tightened. A faint flicker crossed her face, something sharp and irritated. Compliance was supposed to be immediate. That was how this worked. Behind her, a young man shifted impatiently. Tyler Grant, late 20s. Expensive watch worn just a little too prominently. Shirt slightly wrinkled, like he had rushed but still wanted to be seen. His foot tapped against the carpet in quick, uneven beats. "That's my seat," Tyler said, louder now, projecting just enough for others to hear. "I always sit there." A woman across the aisle glanced up from her magazine. A businessman lowered his reading glasses, attention gathered like static. Margaret turned slightly toward Tyler, her entire demeanor softening in an instant. "I'm so sorry about this, sir," she said, her voice now smooth, almost warm. "We'll fix it right away." Then she turned back to Ethan. The warmth vanished. "I need to see your boarding pass, not a request, a directive." Ethan held her gaze for a second longer than necessary. Not confrontational, just measuring. Then he reached into his jacket, slow, deliberate, and pulled out his phone. A few taps, the screen lit up. Boarding details, name. Seat 2A, first class. He held it up. Margaret leaned in, eyes narrowing. For a fraction of a second, something shifted. Confusion, recognition trying to form. Then it disappeared. "There's been a system error," she said smoothly, straightening. "This seat was assigned to Mr. Grant. Your ticket must have been incorrectly upgraded. A lie. Clean. Practiced." Ethan's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of his phone. Not enough for anyone to notice unless they were looking for it. "My ticket wasn't an upgrade," he said. Still calm. Still controlled. "I purchased this seat." Tyler let out a short laugh under his breath. Not loud. Just enough. "Look," he said, stepping closer, invading the space without asking. "I've got a big meeting in London. I need to sleep. You can just move back. Premium economy, whatever. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. The words hung in the air, heavy with something no one wanted to name. Ethan turned his head slightly, just enough to look at him. The cabin seemed to tighten. There was no anger in Ethan's expression. That was what made it worse. No raised voice, no visible reaction, just a steady, unblinking focus that made Tyler shift his weight without realizing it. Margaret stepped in quickly, reclaiming control. "Sir," she said, louder now, projecting authority down the length of the cabin, "you are holding up boarding. I need you to gather your belongings and move to your new seat." New seat. The phrase landed like a verdict. "What seat?" Ethan asked. "Row 44, she said. "Middle." A pause. A few passengers exchanged glances. Someone in the back let out a quiet exhale. Even in first class, people understood what that meant, from the front of the aircraft to the very back. Ethan's eyes didn't leave hers. "And if I don't?" he asked. Margaret didn't hesitate. "Then I will have the captain call airport security," she said, each word precise, sharpened. "And you will be removed from this aircraft." Silence. Total. The kind that presses against your ears. Somewhere, a glass touched down softly against a tray. Someone else shifted in their seat, the leather creaking faintly. Ethan knew this moment. Not the plane, not the people, the structure. Raise your voice, and you become the problem. Resist, and you become the headline. One wrong move, and everything you built can be rewritten in seconds by someone else's camera. Across the aisle, a man subtly angled his phone. Not obvious, but not hidden either. Ethan saw it. Of course he did. He saw everything. Margaret stood taller now, confidence settling in. This was her domain, her rules, federal regulations behind her, authority unquestioned. She believed she had already won. Tyler smirked, folding his arms, leaning back slightly like a spectator at the end of a predictable play. "Come on," he muttered. "Don't make this a thing." Ethan looked at him once more, then back at Margaret. For a brief moment, something passed through his eyes. Not anger, not humiliation. Calculation. Cold. Precise. Final. "Row 44, he repeated quietly. "Yes," Margaret said. "Now." A beat. Then Ethan moved. Slowly. He set his champagne down on the tray table with care, the glass making a soft, controlled click. He reached down, picked up his leather briefcase, adjusted his jacket with practiced ease. No sudden movements, no resistance, no scene. That was what made the tension snap, because this wasn't defeat. This was something else. He stepped into the aisle, standing to his full height now, taller than Tyler, taller than Margaret, his presence suddenly impossible to ignore. For a second, no one spoke. Then he walked, past Margaret, past Tyler, through the cabin that had just judged him without knowing a single fact. Every step measured, every movement deliberate. The camera, if there had been one, would have followed him down that narrow aisle. First class fading behind him, business class next, then premium economy, and finally, the back, where the air felt heavier, warmer, real. Ethan didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because the moment he sat down, in seat 44E, wedged between strangers, knees pressed tight against the seat in front of him, the real story hadn't ended. It had just begun. The cabin changed the moment he crossed the invisible line. The air felt thicker back here. Warmer. Used. The polished silence of first class was gone, replaced by a restless hum. Overhead, bins slammed shut. A baby cried somewhere, 2 rows behind. The faint smell of reheated food lingered, mixed with something human and unavoidable. Seat 44E middle. Ethan paused for a fraction of a second, eyes scanning the row like a man studying a problem, not a punishment. To his left, a teenage boy hunched over a handheld game console, fingers moving fast, eyes locked, completely absorbed. To his right, an older man leaned heavily against the armrest, already asleep, mouth slightly open, breath slow and uneven. There was no space. There was never meant to be. Ethan turned sideways and eased himself into the seat, careful, precise, folding into a space that rejected him at every angle. His knees pressed against the seat ahead. The armrests were already claimed. The overhead light flickered once, then steadied. No one clapped. No one protested. No one from first class came back to check. Of course they didn't. A flight attendant passed by without slowing, her eyes darting quickly to him, then away, like she had already been warned. Do not engage. Do not acknowledge. Contain the situation. Ethan adjusted his jacket, smoothing the fabric over his lap, movements controlled, almost ritualistic. He placed his briefcase under the seat with exact alignment, not letting it touch either neighbor's space. He exhaled once, slow, measured. The engines roared louder now as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. A low vibration traveled up through the floor, into the seat, into his bones. The boy beside him glanced over. He blinked once, twice, eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the suit, the watch, the posture. "You don't belong back here," the kid said. Not rudely, just honestly. Ethan's mouth curved faintly. Not quite a smile. "Sometimes," he replied quietly. "This is exactly where you need to be." The boy frowned, confused, then shrugged and went back to his game. Outside the small oval window across the aisle, the runway lights stretched into thin, glowing lines. The plane turned, aligned, paused. Then the engines surged. The force pressed Ethan back into the seat as the aircraft accelerated, faster, louder, the cabin rattling slightly as steel lifted from ground into sky. No one in first class felt this. Not like this. Not from here. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second. Not to rest. To focus. By the time the seatbelt sign dinged off, the cabin shifted again. People relaxed. Conversations returned in low murmurs. Overhead lights dimmed slightly. Ethan opened his eyes and reached for his briefcase. Smooth. Controlled. Efficient. He pulled out a slim laptop, placed it on his lap, opened it with a soft click. The screen lit his face in a cool glow, sharp against the dim cabin. A prompt appeared. Network connection required. He reached up, tapped the screen on the seat in front of him, navigating the sluggish interface until the Wi-Fi purchase page loaded. $30 for premium access. He didn't hesitate. A credit card appeared between his fingers, black, unmarked, sliding into the slot. Approved. Connection established. Most people would have opened a complaint form, typed an angry message, posted something online. Ethan did none of that. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for half a second. Then they moved. Fast. Precise. Controlled violence. A new email. Recipient. Jonathan Reed. The name sat at the top like a loaded weapon. Chief Executive Officer. Meridian Airlines. Ethan didn't blink. He added more names. Board of Directors. Legal Counsel. Public Relations. Internal Compliance. Each address entered with exact intent. No one left out. No one spared. Subject line, breach of contract, racial discrimination, immediate legal action. The words didn't need decoration. They were already lethal. Ethan began to type. Every sentence clean, cold, irrefutable. No emotion, no exaggeration, just facts. At 12 minutes past departure, he wrote, I was removed from my confirmed first-class seat, seat 2A, by senior purser Margaret Collins. He described her tone, her refusal to verify documentation, the fabricated system error, the threat of law enforcement, each detail placed carefully, like evidence on a table. Around him, the cabin continued its ordinary life. A flight attendant rolled a cart down the aisle, asking for drinks. Ice clinked into plastic cups. Someone laughed softly at a joke. The boy beside him cursed under his breath when he lost a game level. Normal. Completely normal. Ethan didn't look up. His world had narrowed to the screen. He continued. This incident represents a direct violation of federal civil rights law, he wrote, as well as a fundamental breach of contractual obligation between Meridian Airlines and myself. His fingers didn't slow. They sharpened. Legal action will be initiated immediately upon landing. All relevant records are to be preserved, including gate logs, onboard communication, and passenger manifests. He paused, not because he was unsure, because this was where the story changed. He leaned back slightly, eyes scanning what he had written, then added one more paragraph. Furthermore, he typed, Cole Capital currently maintains a 9.6% equity position in Meridian's parent holding structure. The cabin noise faded. Not physically, but inside him. Everything aligned. An emergency shareholder meeting will be called. A vote of no confidence in executive leadership will be proposed. No wasted words, no threats, just inevitability. He finished with his name, Ethan Cole, managing partner, Cole Capital. He read it once, only once. The email was airtight. He pressed send. The progress bar moved slowly, almost lazily, across the bottom of the screen. Then it disappeared. Gone. Out into the dark sky, carried by invisible signals, racing toward servers, inboxes, phones that would light up in quiet rooms where men believed they were in control. Ethan closed the laptop. The click was soft. Final. He leaned his head back against the thin seat, eyes open, staring forward. The older man beside him shifted, muttered something in his sleep, his arm pressing heavier against Ethan's side. Ethan didn't move, didn't adjust, didn't reclaim space. He sat exactly where he had been placed, because that mattered. Every minute in this seat was now part of the record. Every second was evidence. Up front, behind a closed curtain, Margaret Collins poured another glass of champagne for a passenger who thanked her with a smile. She believed the situation was resolved, handled, forgotten. She had no idea that somewhere, far below the surface of this quiet flight, something had already begun to collapse. And by the time this plane touched the ground, no one on board would still be standing where they were now. At 2:13 in the morning, Manhattan was quiet, but the phone on Michael Sterling's nightstand lit up like an alarm. He didn't ignore it. He never did. The ringtone was different, sharper, reserved for a handful of clients who didn't call unless something had already gone very, very wrong. He reached for the phone without turning on the light. His eyes adjusted to the glow of the screen. One new email. From Ethan Cole. Michael sat up. The sheets fell away from his chest as he opened it, the blue light reflecting in his eyes, sharpening them instantly, like a switch had been flipped inside his mind. He read the first paragraph, then the second. By the third, his posture changed. Straight. Alert. Focused. By the final line, he was already moving. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, bare feet hitting the cold floor, the chill barely registering. Jesus, he muttered under his breath, not in shock, but in recognition. This wasn't a complaint. This was a blueprint for destruction. Michael stood, already dialing. The call connected on the second ring. "Robert," he said, voice low but urgent. "I need you online. Now." A groggy voice on the other end tried to form a sentence. "What time is it?" "It's the time you start working," Michael cut in. "Pull everything we have on Meridian Airlines. Corporate structure, shareholder breakdown, legal exposure. I want it on my screen in 10 minutes. The line went silent. Then, "Yes, sir." Michael ended the call, already walking toward his desk, flipping on a lamp that cast a sharp pool of light across stacks of documents and a wide, empty workspace. He didn't sit. He read the email again. Slower this time, each sentence mapped out like coordinates. Breach of contract, racial discrimination, threat of law enforcement. He exhaled slowly. "This is clean," he murmured. Too clean. Ethan hadn't written this in anger. That was the most dangerous part. There were no emotional spikes, no wasted words, no exaggerations that could be challenged. Just facts and leverage. Michael's eyes landed on the number. 9.6%. He let out a short, humorless breath. "That's not a complaint," he said to the empty room. "That's a weapon." His laptop chimed. Incoming files. Robert had delivered. Michael dropped into his chair, fingers moving quickly now, opening documents, scanning, cross-referencing. Meridian Airlines, publicly traded, large institutional backing, and then, there it was, Cole Capital, 9.6% stake. Michael leaned back slightly, a slow smile forming at the edge of his mouth. "They don't even know yet," he whispered. He could see it already. The headlines, the algorithms reacting, the cascade. He picked up his phone again. Another call. "Wake the litigation team," he said, the moment the line connected. "Federal filing, civil rights violation, emergency injunction. I want a draft ready before that plane lands." On the other end, a voice steadier this time. "Understood. And get PR on standby," Michael added. "We're not releasing everything. Not yet. We control the timing." He ended the call. The room was fully awake now. So was the war. Across the state line, in a sprawling estate in Connecticut, another phone began to ring. Jonathan Reed didn't hear it at first. He was asleep. Deep, uninterrupted sleep. The kind earned by a man who believed his systems were stable, his company secure, his world predictable. The phone rang again. Then again. Finally he stirred, hand reaching blindly across the nightstand until his fingers closed around the device. He squinted at the screen. Multiple missed calls. Incoming call. From his chief operating officer. Jonathan frowned, already irritated, already preparing to be annoyed. He answered. "This better be good," he said, voice thick with sleep. On the other end, there was no hesitation. "Have you checked your email?" Jonathan exhaled sharply. "It's the middle of the night, Richard." "You need to check it," the COO said, voice tight. Too tight. Right now. Something in that tone cut through the fog. Jonathan sat up. The room felt colder. He grabbed his tablet from the nightstand, unlocking it with a quick swipe, opening his inbox. There it was, flagged, high priority, multiple recipients. His eyes moved, line by line, word by word. The color drained from his face. "What is this?" he whispered. No one answered. He read it again, slower, more carefully. Each sentence hit harder the second time. Removed from first class, threatened with law enforcement, racial discrimination. Jonathan swung his legs off the bed, standing now, pacing across the hardwood floor, the tablet still in his hand like something unstable. "Tell me this isn't real," he said into the phone. A pause. Then, "It's real." Jonathan stopped. "What do the records say?" he demanded. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, he bought the seat. Full fare. 3 weeks ago. Jonathan closed his eyes. "Seat 2A? "Yes." "And the other passenger? Originally booked in business class, upgraded manually." Jonathan's grip tightened on the tablet. "Manually," he repeated. "Yes. No system error. No glitch. No excuse." Jonathan felt something twist in his chest. Not fear. Recognition. He knew exactly who Ethan Cole was. They had met. Not in an office. Not in a boardroom. On a golf course. 3 weeks ago. Jonathan had walked that course, smiling, shaking hands, making promises, asking, quietly, carefully, that Cole Capital not pull their investment. He had called Ethan a valued partner. He had meant it, or at least he thought he had. Now his own airline had taken that same man and put him in seat 44E. "Where is the plane?" Jonathan asked. "Over the Atlantic," the COO replied. "About 2 hours in." Jonathan turned, staring out into the darkness beyond the glass walls of his bedroom. Black sky. No horizon. "Get me the captain," he said. "Sir, I don't care how," Jonathan snapped. "Use ACARS. Wake him up. I want this fixed before that plane lands." There was no hesitation now. Understood. Jonathan ended the call. The room felt too quiet, too still. He looked down at the tablet again, at the email, at the name. Ethan Cole. For a brief moment, Jonathan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not anger, not denial. Something colder. He walked back to the bed, sat down slowly, elbows on his knees, tablet hanging loosely in his hands. He could already see it. The board, the investors, the questions, the headlines. He exhaled once. Long, controlled. "Margaret," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then he shook his head. "No," he corrected. "This isn't about her. This was bigger. Much bigger. Because somewhere, at 30,000 feet, a man who never raised his voice had just pressed send. And everything that followed was no longer under anyone else's control. The printer in the cockpit woke before anyone spoke. A thin strip of thermal paper slid out with a dry, stuttering chatter, the sound sharp against the steady hum of instruments. Captain Daniel Brooks frowned, reached over, and tore it free in one clean motion. Mid-flight messages were routine. Weather. Routing. Minor adjustments. This one was not routine. He read the header. "Urgent. Flash override. From CEO Jonathan Reed." Brooks's jaw tightened. He read the first line, then the second. His shoulders squared without him realizing it, spine locking into something older than habit. Wrongfully downgraded, major shareholder, immediate relocation. He read it again. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. Move Ethan Cole back to first class. Remove current occupant. Apologize. Do not escalate. Purser to report for disciplinary review upon landing. Brooks felt the aircraft continue on autopilot beneath him, steady, indifferent, slicing through the black Atlantic sky. Inside the cockpit, everything looked the same. Everything was not the same. He reached for the interphone without hesitation and pressed the button for the forward galley. "Margaret," he said, voice flat, controlled. "Get to the cockpit, now." No pleasantries, no explanation. A beat of silence on the other end. Then, "On my way, Captain." Brooks set the paper down carefully, smoothing it against the console like it might shift if left alone. His first officer glanced over, reading the tension without needing the words. "Problem?" the first officer asked quietly. Brooks didn't look at him. "Big one?" he said. Footsteps approached outside, firm at first, confident, then slowing as they reached the door. Margaret Collins entered with the same posture she had carried all evening, shoulders back, chin high, authority wrapped around her like a uniform she had worn for decades. "Everything all right, Captain?" she asked, a faint smile already forming, rehearsed, controlled. Brooks didn't answer. He picked up the paper and handed it to her. She took it. Casually at first, her eyes scanned the top line. The smile faded. Her grip tightened slightly, the paper trembling just enough to make a faint rustling sound in the quiet cockpit. She read further. The color drained from her face. Wrongfully downgraded. Major shareholder. Disciplinary review. The words didn't just sit on the page. They hit. Hard. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again, like her brain needed a second to catch up with what her eyes were seeing. "Captain, she started. Brooks cut her off. "The system doesn't lie," he said, voice low, each word deliberate. "But apparently you do." Margaret swallowed. Her throat felt dry. "I thought there was an error," she said, the confidence gone now, replaced by something thinner, fragile. "The manifest. I've seen the manifest," Brooks said. Silence. Heavy. "You downgraded him," Brooks continued, eyes fixed on her now, manually. Margaret's fingers tightened around the paper. "That passenger, he didn't look." She stopped. Too late. Brooks's eyes hardened. "He didn't look like what?" he asked. Margaret said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Brooks leaned back slightly, exhaling once through his nose, controlled, but not calm. "You just cost this airline millions," he said. "Maybe more." Margaret's breath came faster now, shallow, uneven. "I can fix this," she said quickly. "I'll move him back. I'll explain." "You'll do more than that," Brooks said. He leaned forward, his voice dropping lower, colder. "You will walk back there. You will apologize. And you will bring him back to that seat." Margaret nodded quickly. Too quickly. "And the other passenger?" she asked, almost whispering now, as if saying it too loud might make it worse. Brooks didn't blink. "I don't care if you put him in the cargo hold," he said. "Get him out of 2A. The words hung in the air. Final. Margaret stood there for a second longer, the paper still in her hand, as if her body hadn't caught up with the command. "Now," Brooks said. That broke it. She turned. The confidence she had walked in with was gone, replaced by something raw, unstable. Her steps were no longer measured. They were careful. Controlled panic. She moved through the forward galley, past the curtain, into first class. The cabin looked exactly as she had left it. Soft lighting, quiet conversations, glasses of champagne catching the glow. Tyler Grant was reclined in seat 2A, legs stretched, one hand holding a glass of scotch now, his face relaxed, satisfied. He looked up as Margaret approached. "Everything sorted?" he asked, a lazy grin pulling at the corner of his mouth. Margaret stopped beside him. For a brief second, she said nothing. Then, "Sir," she began, voice tight, "there's been an error." Tyler's grin didn't fade. "I figured," he said. "Took you long enough." "You are not assigned to this seat," she continued, the words tasting wrong as they left her mouth. "You need to gather your belongings and return to your original seat." The grin froze, then shifted into disbelief. "Excuse me?" Tyler said. "You were originally booked in business class. Margaret said. Seat 14B. This seat belongs to another passenger. Tyler laughed. Short. Sharp. No, he said. No, that's not happening. It is, Margaret said. For the first time, there was no softness in her tone, no accommodation, just urgency. I'm already settled, Tyler snapped, straightening slightly. You told me there was a double booking. I was mistaken, Margaret said. The words burned. Tyler's eyes narrowed. So fix it, he said. Move him somewhere else. Margaret felt something twist in her chest. No, she said. Tyler blinked. What? You are moving, she repeated. Tyler leaned forward now, his voice dropping, sharper. Or what? He said. You going to call security on me? The irony hit her like a slap. For a second, she almost laughed. But nothing about this was funny. The CEO of this airline is watching this flight in real time, she said, her voice barely above a whisper now, but carrying more weight than anything she had said all night. If you don't move, the captain will have you restrained. Silence. Tyler stared at her. Really stared now, looking for something in her face, and finding it. Fear. Real fear. His expression changed. The arrogance didn't disappear. It cracked, just slightly. He cursed under his breath, grabbing his bag, movements sharp, aggressive, stuffing items inside without care. This is unbelievable, he muttered. You people don't know who you're dealing with. Margaret didn't respond. She stepped back, giving him space. Watching. Waiting. Because now she understood something she hadn't before. She didn't know who she had been dealing with. Not even close. Tyler shoved past her, brushing her shoulder as he stormed down the aisle, his humiliation trailing behind him like a shadow. The cabin watched, every pair of eyes, quiet, curious, sensing the shift. Margaret stood there for a second, staring at the now empty seat, 2A, the seat that had started everything. Then she turned and began the long walk to the back of the plane, each step heavier than the last. Each row she passed a reminder of distance, of consequence, of the moment she couldn't take back. Somewhere behind her, the curtain swayed slightly, and ahead, deep in the narrow, crowded rows of economy, Ethan Cole was still exactly where she had put him, waiting. Not for her. For what came next. By the time Margaret Collins reached row 44, her hands were no longer steady. The walk had felt longer than it should have. Past business class, where seats stretched into beds and soft lighting hid everything uncomfortable. Past premium economy, where space still existed, where people still pretended things were fair. And then into the narrow rows, where the illusion disappeared. Here, everything was visible, every inch, every compromise. She stopped in the aisle, row 44E. Ethan Cole sat exactly where she had left him. No shift, no adjustment, no visible irritation. His posture was the same, straight, composed. One hand resting lightly on his closed laptop, the other on his thigh. His eyes forward, unfocused, as if he were looking through the seat ahead of him, past the cabin, past the aircraft itself. The boy beside him was still playing his game. The older man leaned heavily against him, breathing deep, unaware of anything unfolding. Ethan did not look like a man waiting to be rescued. He looked like a man who had already decided something. Margaret swallowed. "Mr. Cole," she said. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat quickly, straightening, trying to rebuild what had already collapsed. "Mr. Cole," she repeated, softer now. Ethan turned his head, slowly. His eyes landed on her. And for the first time since she had met him, Margaret felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in decades. Not authority, Not control, judgment. It was quiet. It didn't need volume. "I am deeply sorry," she said. The words felt foreign, heavy, unnatural in her mouth. "There has been a misunderstanding," she continued quickly, the script forming out of instinct, out of years of damage control. "Your seat is ready. We would like to escort you back to first class." Ethan didn't move, didn't blink. A few passengers nearby leaned slightly, listening without appearing to listen. The boy paused his game just for a second. Even the hum of the cabin seemed to shift, like the air itself was paying attention. "A misunderstanding," Ethan repeated. His voice was low, even, but something inside it had changed. Margaret nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. An error on our part. I take full responsibility. Please allow me to." "You refuse to look at my ticket," Ethan said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt aggressively. He placed the words into the air with precision. Margaret stopped. Her mouth remained slightly open, but no sound came out. "You told me there was a system error," he continued. "You didn't check. You didn't verify. You decided." Each sentence landed. Measured. Controlled. Margaret felt heat rise in her face. She tried. "You threatened to call the police," Ethan said. Now her throat tightened. Passengers in the surrounding rows had stopped pretending not to listen. Eyes shifted. Phones appeared subtly, angled just enough. This was no longer private. "You didn't misunderstand," Ethan said. He leaned back slightly in the cramped seat, adjusting his shoulders against the narrow frame, making the discomfort visible without exaggeration. "You made a decision," he finished. Silence. Margaret felt it press against her chest. Her training had prepared her for angry passengers, for shouting, for escalation. Not this. Not calm. Not clarity. "I'm asking you to return to your seat," she said, voice softer now, almost pleading beneath the surface. "Everything has been corrected." Ethan glanced briefly at the seat around him, the tight space, the arm pressed against him, the noise, the lack of air. Then back at her. "I'm comfortable here," he said. Margaret blinked. "What?" "I said I'm comfortable," Ethan repeated. The words didn't match the reality. That was the point. "Sir, please," she said quickly, urgency breaking through now. "The captain has requested." "The captain wasn't here," Ethan said. Margaret stopped again. Her breath caught. "He didn't see what you did," Ethan continued. "He didn't hear what you said." A pause. "He's responding to a report," Ethan added. "Not the truth." Margaret's hands tightened at her sides. "I'm telling you the truth," she said, a hint of desperation slipping into her tone. Ethan studied her. Not her uniform. Not her position. Her. "Are you?" he asked. The question hung. Margaret felt something inside her shift. Not enough to change what had happened, but enough to realize she could not control what came next. "My job is on the line," she said. It came out before she could stop it. Too honest. Too exposed. Ethan didn't react. "That stopped being relevant," he said. "The moment you decided my dignity wasn't." The words landed harder than anything before them. Not loud, not aggressive. Final. Margaret felt her chest tighten. For a second, she didn't recognize the feeling. Then she did. It was loss, not of the job, of control. "Please," she said, "quieter now. Just come back to your seat." Ethan looked at her for one long second. Then he shook his head. "No. Simple. Absolute." Margaret's eyes widened slightly. "You're refusing?" "I'm staying exactly where you put me," Ethan said. A murmur rippled through the nearby rows. Small, contained. But real. Margaret felt it. The shift. The loss of narrative. "Sir, this isn't necessary," she said, trying again, grasping at something that would restore balance. "We can fix this." Ethan leaned forward slightly now. For the first time, he closed the distance between them. Not physically, but in presence. "You can't fix it," he said. Quiet. Controlled. "You can document it." Margaret's breath stopped. He leaned back again. Settling. Final. "Go back to the front of the aircraft," he added. "We have nothing left to discuss." The conversation ended there. Not because she agreed, because there was nowhere left to go. Margaret stood frozen for a second longer. Then she turned. Her steps were slower now, heavier. The walk back felt different. Not just longer. Exposed. She could feel eyes on her. Not admiring, not trusting, watching, measuring, judging. Back in first class, the seat waited. Empty. Perfect. Pointless. Margaret stood beside it, staring down at the leather, at the glass of champagne that had already been replaced, at the illusion of control that had existed just minutes ago. It was gone. Somewhere behind her, separated by rows and class and assumptions, Ethan Cole remained in seat 44E. And for the first time in her career, Margaret Collins understood something she had never had to consider before. She wasn't in charge of this situation anymore. She hadn't been for quite some time. The cabin felt different after that. No announcement had been made. No visible alarm had sounded. But something had shifted beneath the surface, subtle and irreversible, like a crack forming deep inside glass that still looked intact. In economy, the flight attendants moved with a new kind of caution. One of them approached Ethan slowly, a tray in her hands, her smile too careful, too rehearsed. "Sir, would you like a warm towel?" she asked. Ethan glanced at her briefly. "No, thank you." She hesitated, then nodded quickly, stepping away as if relieved to escape the interaction. 2 rows ahead, a man leaned back in his seat and whispered something to his wife. She turned, looking over her shoulder at Ethan with open curiosity now, not even trying to hide it. The boy beside him kept playing, but slower now, distracted, glancing up every few seconds. The older man shifted again in his sleep, his weight pressing heavier against Ethan's arm. Ethan didn't move, didn't adjust. He let the discomfort remain. Every inch of it. Because it mattered. Minutes passed. Then more. The flight settled into its rhythm. Cabin lights dimmed further. The hum of the engines deepened into something constant, almost hypnotic. Up front, behind the curtain, Margaret Collins stood in the galley, gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened metal surface. Not the version she recognized, not the version she had built over 3 decades. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. A younger flight attendant hovered nearby, unsure whether to speak. "Is everything okay?" the girl finally asked, voice soft, cautious. Margaret didn't answer. She couldn't, because the question itself felt absurd. Nothing was okay. Not anymore. She had replayed the moment over and over in her head. The seat, the tone, the threat. Each detail sharper now, stripped of the certainty she had wrapped around it before. He didn't argue. That was what unsettled her most. He didn't fight. He didn't plead. He simply complied. And in doing so, he had taken something from her she didn't know how to get back. Control. A sudden chime broke the silence. Not from the cabin, from the interphone. Margaret's head snapped up. The sound was sharper this time, insistent. She reached for it. "Forward galley," she said, forcing her voice steady. A pause. Then the captain's voice. "Status. 1 word. Flat." Margaret swallowed. He's refusing to return to first class, she said. Another pause. Longer. He what? The captain asked. He declined, Margaret said, choosing her words carefully now, aware that every sentence mattered. He stated he is comfortable where he is. Silence. Margaret could almost hear the calculation happening on the other end. Did you apologize? The captain asked. Yes. Did you explain the error? Yes. And he still refused. Yes. Another pause. Then, quieter now, colder. Then leave him there. Margaret blinked. What? Leave him there, the captain repeated. Do not escalate. Do not engage further. Margaret's grip tightened on the receiver. But that's an order, the captain said. The line went dead. Margaret stood there, the receiver still pressed to her ear, even after the silence settled. Leave him there. The words echoed. Not resolution. Containment. She slowly lowered the receiver back into place. Behind her, the younger attendant shifted nervously. What did he say? She asked. Margaret stared straight ahead. Nothing, she said. But that wasn't true. The message was clear. The situation was no longer about customer service. It was about damage control. Back in seat 44E, Ethan opened his laptop again. The screen illuminated his face in the dim cabin. Sharp angles, steady eyes. New messages. Incoming. Fast. Michael Sterling. Subject. Received. Ethan opened it. 2 lines. We're moving. Prepare for impact. Ethan closed the message. No surprise, no reaction, just confirmation. Another notification appeared. Internal. Coal Capital. Board alert. Triggered. Ethan leaned back slightly, fingers resting on the keyboard. Everything was in motion now. He didn't need to push. He didn't need to escalate. The system would do that for him. Across the aisle, a woman pretended to scroll through her phone while clearly watching him. A man 2 rows ahead adjusted his glasses, looking back again and again. They didn't know who he was, but they knew something was happening. People always did. They felt it before they understood it. The boy beside him leaned closer. Are you, in trouble? He asked quietly. Ethan glanced at him. No. The boy frowned. Then why do they move you back here? Ethan paused, just for a second. Because they thought they could, he said. The boy processed that. Slowly. Then nodded once, like it made sense in a way he couldn't fully explain. Ethan returned his attention to the screen. Another message, this time from an unknown sender. Internal Meridian address. Subject, urgent inquiry. He didn't open it. Not yet. Timing mattered. Everything about this required timing. He closed the laptop again, rested his hands on top of it. Waited. Up front, Margaret sat in the jump seat now, hands folded tightly in her lap, staring at nothing. The cabin lights flickered slightly as the aircraft hit a patch of mild turbulence. A few passengers shifted. Seatbelts clicked. The plane steadied. But nothing else did. Margaret's mind drifted back again, to the moment she had spoken the words. You don't belong here. She hadn't said it exactly like that, but she had meant it. And now she wasn't sure what that meant about her. The aircraft continued forward, 30,000 feet above the ocean, a sealed system, no exits, no escape, only time, and time was no longer on her side. Somewhere far below, in offices that never slept, screens were lighting up, phones were ringing, decisions were being made by people who had never stepped foot on this aircraft. They didn't care about the service. They didn't care about the flight. They cared about the damage. And the damage had already begun. Ethan sat still in seat 44E, surrounded by strangers, pressed into a space that was never meant for him. Uncomfortable, unmoved, untouched, because while everyone else on that plane was reacting, he was waiting, and what he was waiting for was already on its way. At 3:07 in the morning, the first headline went live. It didn't explode. Not yet. It appeared quietly on a single terminal in a glass-walled office overlooking Lower Manhattan. A junior analyst leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he read the subject line again, making sure he hadn't misread it. Federal civil rights complaint filed against Meridian Airlines. He clicked. The details were sparse, deliberately incomplete. Names redacted. Flight number visible. Timestamp recent. Language sharp. Wrongful removal from first class. Threat of law enforcement. Racial discrimination. The analyst's fingers hovered for half a second. Then he tagged it. High priority. Across the room, another screen lit up. Then another. The signal spread. Not through noise, through systems. In a midtown newsroom, a night editor sat alone under cold fluorescent light, sipping stale coffee. His screen refreshed. He leaned closer. Read. Then read again. He didn't know the name yet. He didn't need it. The structure was familiar. Serious. Dangerous. He picked up his phone. "Wake legal," he said. "And get me finance. Now." On the other side of the city, inside a quiet server room, algorithms began to move. They didn't understand outrage. They didn't care about context. They read keywords: risk, liability, discrimination, lawsuit. The first small trades triggered. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to test the water. Back on flight 882, none of that was visible. The cabin remained dim, steady, suspended in artificial calm. But something had changed in the rhythm. Flight attendants moved differently now, quieter, more precise, avoiding eye contact where they could, watching where they couldn't. In first class, seat 2, A remained empty, untouched, a silent accusation. Margaret Collins stood in the galley again, staring at it from a distance, like it might suddenly fill itself if she looked long enough. It didn't. A younger attendant approached her, holding a tablet. "They're asking for updates," she said softly. Margaret didn't turn. "Who is?" she asked. "Operations," the girl replied. "And corporate." Margaret closed her eyes briefly. Corporate. The word felt heavier now. "They want confirmation," the girl continued, "that the passenger has been reseated." Margaret opened her eyes. "He hasn't," she said. The girl hesitated. "Should I? Tell them that?" Margaret finally turned. "Yes," she said. The truth now mattered more than the story. The girl nodded quickly and walked away. Margaret watched her go, then looked back at the empty seat. She could feel it. The shift in gravity. Somewhere far beyond this aircraft, decisions were being made that would land here, eventually, whether she was ready or not. In row 44, Ethan sat exactly as before. Still, composed, unreachable. The boy beside him had stopped playing. His console rested loosely in his hands now, forgotten. "You're not just some guy, are you?" the kid asked quietly. Ethan didn't look at him. "No," he said. The boy swallowed. "I knew it," he muttered. Ethan's gaze stayed forward. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Another notification appeared on his laptop, this one from internal markets. Meridian stock, pre-market movement. Down. Small, but measurable. Ethan opened it. Numbers scrolled, trends forming, patterns emerging, the first cracks. He closed the screen again. Not satisfaction, not yet, just confirmation. Across the aisle, a man leaned over to his wife. "This is going to be bad," he whispered. She nodded slowly. People felt it now. Not just curiosity, not just tension. Consequence. Up front, Tyler Grant sat in business class, slouched in his downgraded seat, staring at the screen in front of him without seeing it. His jaw was tight. His fingers tapped against the armrest in short, irritated bursts. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had done nothing wrong. He had taken the seat offered to him. That was all. Right? A flight attendant approached. "Can I get you anything, sir?" she asked carefully. Tyler didn't look at her. "Yeah," he said. "An explanation." She hesitated. "I'm afraid I don't have one," she replied. Tyler let out a short laugh. "Of course you don't," he said. He leaned back, crossing his arms, trying to reclaim something that had already slipped. Control. He didn't know it yet. But he had never had it. Back in the cockpit, Captain Brooks stared at the instrument panel, but his mind wasn't on the flight path. His first officer glanced at him. "Everything still stable?" he asked. Brooks nodded once. "The plane is," he said. A pause. "What about everything else?" the first officer asked. Brooks exhaled slowly. "Everything else," he said, "is about to get very unstable." The words hung between them. No exaggeration, no drama, just reality. At 3:21 in the morning, the second headline dropped. This one had more detail, more weight, more reach. Major shareholder involved. That changed everything. Screens lit up faster now. Phones rang harder. Decisions accelerated. In a conference room in London, lights flicked on as a team of analysts gathered around a central screen, faces pale, voices low, processing information that was arriving too quickly to fully understand. "Is this confirmed?" one of them asked. "It's spreading," another replied. "That's enough." Back on the plane, the cabin lights dimmed further. Passengers shifted into sleep, or pretended to. But the tension didn't sleep. It sat in the aisles, in the empty seat at the front, in the quiet man at the back. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Not resting. Listening. Feeling the movement of something much larger than this aircraft. He had seen it before. The moment before collapse. It never looked dramatic at first. It looked like this. Quiet. Contained. Unavoidable. He opened his eyes again. The boy beside him was watching him now. Not with curiosity, with something closer to respect. Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to, because somewhere far below, the world had already started to react. And up here, at 30,000 feet, they were still pretending they had time. By the time the aircraft began its descent, no one on board was pretending anymore. The cabin lights slowly brightened, a soft, artificial dawn washing over rows of tired faces. Seatbelts clicked, window shades lifted. The first pale light of London filtered through the oval windows, cold and grey, stretching across the cabin like a quiet warning. No one was talking about the weather. No one was talking about sleep. Every conversation, every glance, every whispered exchange circled the same unspoken truth. Something had happened on this flight, and it wasn't over. In first class, the empty seat at 2A remained untouched. The champagne glass had been cleared, the blanket folded. Everything reset with perfect precision, as if the airline believed it could erase the moment by restoring the surface. But absence has weight, and that seat carried it. Margaret Collins stood near the galley, hands clasped tightly in front of her, posture rigid, face pale under the softened lighting. She had not sat down in over an hour. She had not eaten. She had not spoken unless necessary. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted back toward the aisle, as if expecting something to come walking forward. It never did, because Ethan Cole had not moved. In row 44E, he remained exactly where he had chosen to remain. Laptop open now, screen glowing, reading, working, as if the cramped seat, the noise, the pressure of bodies around him were irrelevant. The boy beside him leaned closer again. "Are you going to say anything when we land?" he asked quietly. Ethan didn't look up. "No," the boy frowned. "That's it?" he asked. Ethan paused, fingers still on the keyboard. Then he turned his head slightly. "They already said everything that matters," he replied. The boy didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. Across the aisle, a woman lowered her phone, her expression tense. She had been reading the news. She wasn't the only one. Screens were lighting up across the cabin now. Notifications, headlines, fragments of a story that had already escaped the aircraft. A man in business class leaned forward, whispering urgently to the person beside him. "It's everywhere," he said. The words traveled, quiet, fast, like a current. Up front, Tyler Grant sat frozen, his phone in his hand, screen glowing against his face. He read the headline once, then again. His throat tightened. His name wasn't there, not yet. But the details were. The flight, the incident, the description. A passenger forcibly removed from first class, racial discrimination, legal action initiated. Tyler's fingers trembled slightly. "This is insane," he muttered. The man beside him glanced over. "What is?" he asked. Tyler shook his head quickly. "Nothing," he said, but his voice didn't match the word. Back in the galley, Margaret's attention snapped to a sound. Footsteps, not rushed, not chaotic, measured. She turned and saw them. 3 men, all in suits, all moving with the same controlled urgency. They didn't look at the cabin. They didn't acknowledge the crew. They walked straight down the aisle, past first class, past the curtain. Margaret's breath caught. This wasn't normal. This wasn't protocol. The lead man stopped briefly beside her. "Margaret Collins?" he asked. His voice was calm, but there was no warmth in it. Margaret nodded. "Yes." He held her gaze for a moment, then looked past her. "Stay here," he said. Not a request. He kept walking. Margaret didn't move. Couldn't. Her hands tightened together, fingers pressing into each other, hard enough to hurt. The men continued down the aisle. Passengers turned their heads, watched, felt it, the shift from rumor to reality. They reached row 44, stopped. The lead man stepped slightly forward. "Mr. Cole," he said. Ethan closed his laptop. Slowly, deliberately. He looked up. The man extended his hand. "My name is Thomas Hayes," he said, "Vice President of Operations." Ethan didn't take the hand. He simply stood. The movement drew every eye in the cabin. The man withdrew his hand without comment. "I'm here on behalf of the executive board," Thomas continued. "We would like to formally apologize for what occurred on this flight." Silence. Absolute. Even the engines seemed quieter now. "We have a private exit arranged for you," Thomas added. "A car is waiting on the tarmac. Our legal team is prepared to—" "No," Ethan said. One word. "Sharp. Clean." Thomas stopped. Ethan stepped into the aisle. Not rushing, not hesitating. "I will exit with the rest of the passengers," he said. His voice carried. Not loud, but clear enough that it reached every corner of the cabin. "I will go through the same process," he continued. "The same line, the same doors." Thomas nodded once. Understanding, or accepting. It didn't matter which. "As you wish," he said. Ethan reached down, picked up his briefcase, adjusting it with the same precision as before. He didn't look at Margaret. Not yet. He began walking. Forward, through the narrow aisle, every step measured, every movement controlled. Passengers moved their legs instinctively, making space, eyes following him as he passed. No one spoke. No one interrupted. Because something had shifted. Not just in this cabin, in the way they saw him, in the way they understood what had happened. He reached the front. Stopped. Margaret stood there, still, silent. Her eyes met his. For a moment, everything narrowed to that space, all the noise, all the movement. Gone. She started. Ethan didn't respond, didn't acknowledge. He stepped past her, just like before. But this time, it wasn't the same. This time, he wasn't being removed. He was leaving, and everyone watching knew the difference. Behind him, Thomas Hayes turned slightly, addressing the rest of the crew. "Prepare for full debrief," he said. His tone left no room for interpretation. Margaret felt it. The final shift, the end of something she had spent decades building. The aircraft door opened. Cold London air rushed in. Fresh, sharp, unforgiving. Ethan stepped onto the jet bridge without looking back, and for the first time since the flight began, no one tried to stop him. By the time Ethan Cole stepped into the terminal, the story had already outrun him. Screens above the concourse flickered with early market updates. Phones buzzed in pockets and hands, vibrating with urgency. Conversations overlapped, sharp and hushed, as travelers moved through the corridor with a new kind of attention. Not toward the gates, toward him. Ethan didn't slow, didn't change direction. He walked with the same measured pace, briefcase in hand, shoulders squared, eyes forward. The polished floor reflected his movement in clean, uninterrupted lines, like a camera tracking a subject that refused to acknowledge it was being filmed. Behind him, the flow of passengers from Flight 882 thickened, and then it broke. Tyler Grant pushed through first, fast, aggressive, dragging his suitcase hard enough that the wheels rattled against the tile. He spotted the cluster of suits waiting near the gate podium. Thomas Hayes stood at the center, 2 legal advisors beside him, 1 compliance officer behind. They didn't look like airline staff anymore. They looked like a response team. Tyler marched straight toward them. "Hey," he called out, loud enough to cut through the noise. "You people running this circus." Heads turned. Not all of them. Just enough. Thomas didn't react immediately. He finished a quiet exchange with one of the attorneys, then turned slowly, eyes settling on Tyler with a calm that wasn't welcoming. "I need to file a complaint," Tyler continued, stepping closer, chest slightly forward, voice rising with each word. "I was promised seat 2A. I was moved halfway through the flight like I didn't matter. That's unacceptable." No one interrupted him. That made it worse. "My father is Richard Grant Sr.," Tyler added, the name coming out like a credential. "We have a significant relationship with this airline. I expect compensation, an upgrade, a full refund." Silence. Thomas studied him for a second longer than necessary. Then he spoke. "Are you Tyler Grant?" The question was quiet. Too quiet. Tyler blinked. "Yeah," he said. "That's right." One of the legal advisors glanced down at a tablet, scrolling quickly, then stopped. Looked up. "That's him," the lawyer said. Thomas nodded once, then stepped closer. Not aggressively, but enough to collapse the distance. Tyler didn't step back. Not yet. "You displaced a passenger in seat 2A, Thomas said. Tyler shrugged. "I sat where I was told to sit," he replied. "That's not my problem." Thomas's expression didn't change. "The passenger you displaced," he continued, "is Ethan Cole." The name landed. Tyler's face tightened slightly. Recognition didn't hit immediately. It crept in. Slow, like a memory surfacing too late. I don't know who that is, Tyler said. Thomas leaned in just enough for his voice to drop below the surrounding noise. He is a principal shareholder in this company, he said. His firm holds nearly 10% of Meridian's equity. Tyler's mouth opened, then closed. The words didn't register all at once. They assembled, piece by piece. 10%, shareholder, company. His grip on the suitcase handle tightened. That's not my fault, he said quickly. Your staff told me to sit there. Thomas straightened. Now there was something in his eyes. Not anger, not frustration. Something colder. It became your problem the moment you stayed, he said. Tyler shook his head. No, he said. No, I didn't do anything wrong. The lawyer beside Thomas turned the tablet slightly, showing a screen. Your conduct has been noted in the incident report, he said. Your statements, your refusal to move initially, your interaction with the purser. Tyler stared at the screen. Didn't read it. Couldn't. That's being taken out of context, he said. Context is exactly what this is about, the lawyer replied. Another pause. Then Thomas spoke again. Your employer has been notified, he said. Tyler froze. What? He asked. Your firm has been informed that your actions have contributed to a federal civil rights complaint involving this airline, Thomas said. The words were precise, deliberate, final. Tyler felt something drop in his chest, hard. That's insane, he said. You can't do that. Thomas didn't respond. He didn't need to. Tyler's phone vibrated. Once, then again, then again. He looked down, missed calls, messages, his father, his supervisor, the managing director. He swallowed, opened the first message, then the second. His face drained of color. What did you do? The text read. Another message. Do not come to the office. Another. We need to talk immediately. Tyler's hand shook. The suitcase slipped from his grip slightly, the wheels hitting the floor with a dull thud. This is overreaction, he said. But the conviction was gone now. No, Thomas said. Just that. No. Tyler looked up. For the first time, there was no arrogance left in his expression. Just confusion, fear, the realization of scale. You were a variable, Thomas continued. A small one. But in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Tyler said nothing. There was nothing left to argue. Around them, the terminal continued to move. People walked. Announcements echoed. Life didn't stop, but it shifted. Because somewhere in that same terminal, Ethan Cole was already moving toward the exit, uninterrupted, unchallenged, unconcerned. Outside, the sky hung low and grey over Heathrow. Cars waited, engines idled. Drivers stood beside open doors. Ethan stepped through the sliding glass exit into the cold air, the temperature biting slightly against his skin. A man approached him. Not rushed, not uncertain. Mr. Cole, he said, holding out a phone. Mr. Reed is on the line. Ethan glanced at the device. Didn't take it. I don't take calls without counsel, he said. The man hesitated. Sir, he insists. Ethan stepped past him. I'm sure he does, he replied. He didn't stop walking, didn't look back. Because behind him, the consequences were still unfolding. Inside boardrooms, inside trading floors, inside the lives of people who had believed they were untouchable. And out here, in the cold morning air, none of that required his presence. It only required his decision. And that decision had already been made. By 9:30 in the morning, New York time, the bell rang on Wall Street, and Meridian Airlines began to bleed. It didn't start with panic. It started with hesitation. Orders paused. Buyers held back. Screens flickered as numbers adjusted, recalculated, tested the edges of confidence. The opening price held for a moment, suspended in a fragile balance that no one believed in anymore. Then it slipped. Not dramatically, just enough. A few cents. Then more. Across trading floors, analysts leaned forward, eyes narrowing, as headlines refreshed in real time. Federal civil rights lawsuit. Major shareholder involved. Internal misconduct. The words stacked, layered, heavy. The algorithms moved next. They didn't debate. They reacted. Sell orders triggered in quiet bursts, then faster, then all at once as the pattern became undeniable. The stock cracked. $42 became 40. 40 became 38. Phones lit up. Get me exposure numbers. Who's holding this? Cut positions now. Voices overlapped, sharp, urgent, controlled but rising. By 10:15, the narrative had shifted from concern to crisis. Institutional investors began to move, not out of emotion, out of calculation. Risk had changed, and risk, once defined, spreads faster than anything else. Vanguard trimmed, State Street reduced, BlackRock adjusted, each move small on its own. Together, devastating. The price dropped again, 36, 34. The chart on every screen turned red, deepening, accelerating. At 10:59, the exchange triggered a circuit breaker. Trading halted, too volatile, too fast, too dangerous. In less than 2 hours, billions had evaporated, not destroyed, transferred. Across the Atlantic, in a quiet boardroom in Mayfair, Ethan Cole sat at the head of a long, polished table, a cup of dark tea resting untouched beside him. The room was silent except for the faint hum of a large screen mounted on the wall. Numbers streamed downward in sharp red lines. Beside him, a senior partner from Blackstone leaned back in his chair, watching the collapse with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "You didn't just respond to what happened on that plane," he said quietly. "You turned it into something else, entirely." Ethan adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, movements precise, unhurried. "I didn't create the problem," he said. "I exposed it." On the screen, Meridian's stock remained frozen, mid-fall, halted but not saved. The partner exhaled slowly. "They're going to call," he said. Ethan didn't look at him. "They already have." As if on cue, the phone in the center of the table lit up. Incoming call. Meridian board. The room didn't move. Didn't speak. Ethan reached forward and pressed the button. The line opened. Static. Then a voice. Tight. Controlled. Barely. "Ethan," Jonathan Reed said, his tone stripped of every layer of confidence it had once carried. "We need to talk." Ethan leaned back slightly. "You've had time to talk," he replied. A pause. Long. Heavy. "We've terminated the purser," Reed said quickly. "We've initiated internal review. We're prepared to offer a settlement. Significant. Immediate." Ethan said nothing. Reed continued, the words coming faster now. "Public apology. Compensation. Whatever you need. Just stabilize this." Silence again, the kind that forces truth into the open. Ethan finally spoke. "I don't want your money," he said. Another pause. "What do you want?" Reed asked. Ethan's gaze shifted to the screen, to the red lines, to the damage, then back to nothing. "Your resignation," he said. The words landed. Clean. Final. On the other end, something broke. "You can't be serious," Reed said, the edge returning. Thin. Desperate. "You're asking me to step down over one incident?" "It wasn't one incident," Ethan said. "It was a system that allowed it." Reed exhaled sharply. "You're overreacting." "No," Ethan replied. "You're underestimating. The room remained still. No one interrupted. No one moved. Because they all understood now. This wasn't a negotiation. It was leverage, and leverage, once applied, doesn't loosen. Ethan leaned forward slightly. While you've been trying to contain this, he continued, we've been buying. The words hung, then settled. Reed didn't respond. He didn't need to. He understood. Slowly. Painfully. How much? He asked. Ethan glanced at the screen. At current levels, he said, our position has increased to 18%. A breath on the other end. Unsteady. Blackstone has taken an additional stake, Ethan added. Combined, we now control just over 25%. Silence. Total. The kind that follows realization, not confusion, not denial. Understanding you've taken the company, Reed said. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Submit your resignation, Ethan said. Forfeit your severance. Vacate 4 board seats. We'll handle the rest. The line remained open, but nothing came through, because there was nothing left to argue. Finally, a different voice, older, weaker. We accept, it said. Ethan pressed the button. The line went dead. He sat back, picked up his tea, took a slow sip. The screen behind him remained red, but no longer uncontrolled, no longer chaotic, because now it was his. Weeks later, at 30,000 feet, the cabin was different. The seats redesigned, the service retrained, the culture rewritten. Ethan sat in first class again. Seat 2A, not as a passenger, as chairman. A flight attendant approached, posture steady, tone respectful. Welcome aboard, Mr. Cole. He nodded once. No smile, no acknowledgement beyond that, because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about what had changed. Power didn't need to raise its voice. It didn't need to prove itself. It moved quietly. It waited, and when the moment came, it reshaped everything. If this story showed you what real power looks like, take a second to like, subscribe, and drop the words, quiet, real power, in the comments.